then you have to probably look at this company as fairly successful. Because while it is probably not even getting to break even, if it creates profitability in the tourism sector, if it creates profitability in the car rental industry, if it provides, for instance, profitability in the retail sectors and in the catering services, and those industries are able to employ additional people, and these industries for many years remain profitable as a result of this airline being open, or of this parastatal being open, then I think you've got to reassess what you judge as successful and say, perhaps here, as a singularized, unique entity, this thing requires interventions, and it probably fails from dollar to cent, but downstream it works. And therefore you are supposed to then expedite the process of fixing it, because if you fix it, the benefits would probably expand exponentially downstream even further and consolidate other sectors of the economy. Let's look at other enterprises. First, many of us would probably say NamPower is a very well-managed company, is a successful company, but from our perspective, it's one of the worst possible parastatals in the Republic of Namibia, because Namibians pay on average 25% more than the South African electricity consumers, because we have a long-term agreement to import electricity from South Africa at a cost 25% higher than the South African consumer would be paying. And that's why South Africa doesn't switch off our electricity, because they get premium here. Yet Cape Town would be switched off. Why? Because electricity is cheaper that side and super expensive that side. Can we classify NamPower, therefore, as a success story? Clearly not. Clearly not. Let's look at NamWater, a corporation that is not involved in the construction of dams, that is not involved in the construction of rural infrastructure. But what happens is, after the government finances the construction of, say, Nekerdal Dam, that infrastructure is handed over to NamWater, 100%, to manage the affairs of that instance. But it did not make a single investment. If you look at NamWater from the perspective of a person in, say, Okonyatu Reservoir, there in the Ojebenjuba region, from the perspective of a person who is an ordinary communal farmer that pays for water at the same level as an urban dweller would pay for water, who has NamWater switching off water immediately as they would do in a town like a local authority would do, water when a farmer doesn't pay, where the electricity, or the water cost rather, is about $3,000 to $4,000 depending on how many cattle you have, and that whether it's drought or rainy season, you are forced to pay your water bill in a communal area. Would we classify then, therefore, such a parastatal as a success story? Because in its books, it reports perhaps break even or a slight profit, it declares dividend and pays the shareholder. Would we then classify such a parastatal as a success story? So we are forced as Namibians to revisit our assumptions and seek greater clarity in terms of when financial reports and declaration of dividends are done, so that as a country, we are able to look at an entity greater than its own boardroom. Because each and every parastatal has been created in this country with a view to enhance the economic opportunities and also to enhance services to society. That's important. And so I have had to relook my assumptions about Air Namibia some year or so ago. And we as LPM are relooking and therefore issuing this narrative to society at large to say, it's about time, what do we define as a successful parastatal? Look at NQNS, what is this thing, NSFAS? Billions given to that parastatal, nothing of fundraising from its own side. I mean, there's nobody that goes and raises funds outside to enhance the types of scholarships they must offer to learners. And yet nobody says this thing has failed, and its failure is only judged in terms of a process issue, not a function of what it does in the overall economy. In other words, NSFAS has failed because it paid money late. That's how we declare its failure. But we don't look at fundamental failures that this thing produces in the total economy of this country. We don't look at it. We look at other institutions that government has created. NIPAM. How many people has it really trained that are able to produce proper services in the broader civil service? Has the civil service, since the training programs of NIPAM began, in our view and our experiences, become far more professional and far more uniquely capable than before the period we've had NIPAM? You look at University of Namibia, one of the epic failures of modern academic history, where they had a person who was a rail worker enrolled for a master's program, and the ranking of that institution dropped, tumbling down like the 9/11 towers, because you now enroll a person who was a rail worker at a geology faculty at a master's level. And it's supposed to be a new normal now. What are we saying? That was an epic failure, where that institution kept on giving classes, kept on giving assignments, kept on lecturing people, but it's standing globally and across the continent, tumbled that institution. Is that not a failure of judgment, of policy? Let's go. I'm going to summarize. Let's go to others. NBC, an institution glamorously positioned to do great work, but is not given often the types of financial support it needs to expand its services, to enhance its digital network capabilities, where so many professionals are deployed that really want to live up to the true cadreship of a journalistic ethical embodiment, but are failed by virtue of internal politics, and therefore is struggling to find validation within Namibian society to pay TV licenses. Is that not a failure? Why would we not be willing to pay for TV licenses? Or why are we less inclined to pay for TV licenses? Probably because there's something fundamentally wrong with NBC. Yet we would pay for our vehicle licenses. We would pay for our insurance policies, even if it's an old car. But for NBC, we'll have problems. So I thought, and we thought, not I, we are a team, that the manner in which Air Namibia question was dealt with was very suspicious. It's marked of elite conspiratorial compact that required a speedy decision to be taken so that some other company can start to take over the skies of this country. Mind you, you now want to sell off everything, and 5 or 10 years down the line, you would want to start over. And where do you start over? Where do you start over? There is no, in our view, further relevance for the existence of the Ministry of State-owned Enterprises, because it seems that the ministry's presence has created more problems than it has solved issues. Clearly. And we thought Leon Jooste was on ball, he was strong, but the same Leon has not also liquidated Transnamib, which is a dead horse. They have not liquidated Transnamib. Whose interests are being served there? Or what are they waiting out? By the way, our view is that if you liquidate Air Namibia, you are probably also going to have to liquidate Airports Company. Yes, they do some business because of airports with British Airways and others, but its biggest chunk would ordinarily come from Air Namibia. Because we can't have our airlines for the purposes, or airports in infrastructure, for the purposes of other private holders, if we say we have closed down business. So there is, of course, we'll agree that there is a need for broader state-owned enterprise reform. What is the problem with the reform of state-owned enterprise? Because political elite have their girlfriends and boyfriends and cambrotos deployed there for filtering information through to them, through which they can further capture resources of the state. This has really been the narrative of creating state-owned enterprises, that you deploy those that will be loyal to you through romantic affinities or some other blood relations, so that through those institutions you're able to capture state resources, as is the case with NamDia. NamDia, we know that fellows were going during weekends to Dubai, selling diamonds at half price, purchasing women of pleasure, and engaging in cognac drinking, and coming back Mondays reporting for duty, and the next weekend only again to do the same, and the subsequent weekend to do the same. And President Geingob is sitting on that report of NamDia. Again, is it a successful enterprise? Is it a successful enterprise? You wonder, NamDia. And so many other enterprises